Om Ganeshaya Namaha Saraswatyay Namaha Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. I'll be talking about the Bhagavad Gita from a sadhaka's point of view. First, I'll be taking up the first and second chapter. This is not a verse by verse explanation, but an overall bird's eye view. It is not a scholarly Sanskrit word by word interpretation, but a Manana which I have doing for myself for sadhana, and I hope that it will be useful for sadhakas. The Bhagavad Gita is the essence of the teachings of all the Upanishads. It is a dialogue on the battlefield of Kurukshetra between the warrior Arjuna and his divine charioteer Shri Krishna. It is we can consider that the Bhagavad Gita was composed by Vedavyasa Maharshi. Vedavyasa Maharshi is the sage Krishna Dvaipayana. The Bhagavad Gita is called the Moksha Grantha. It treatises on liberation and comprises of 700 verses which are spread over 18 chapters. It adopts an integrated approach for the liberation of the soul by bringing about perfection through the disciplines of Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Dhyana Yoga and Jnana Yoga. It forms a part of the Bhishma Parva of Mahabharata, comprising the chapters 25 to 42 of the Mahabharata. It is treated as Smriti Grantha and considered one among the Prasthanatrayas. And Bhagavad Pada Shankaracharya has written his elaborate commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, which is a masterpiece. The Bhagavad Gita gradually unfolds the sixfold steps of Indriya Niyantrana, virtues or gunas, Sattvika gunas, Indriya Niyantrana or sense control, virtues, cultivation of virtues or Sattva guna, meditation or dhyana, knowledge or gnana, vairagya or dispassion, and finally moksha or liberation. It's a step-by-step integrated process for taking the soul to realize its own ever-present liberation. It's an adventure that which every soul should undertake. Having taken the human birth, every single human being is entitled to take part in the supreme adventure. The first step towards this supreme adventure is sense control or Indriya Niyantrana. So second step is inculcation of virtues. Virtues can have basis only when all the five senses are under our control. And only when a person possesses virtues, only then he can practice right dhyana or right meditation. And only through right meditation he attains real knowledge and thinks beyond sense perceptions. Only then he becomes aware of the soul through intuition. Right knowledge creates a dispassion from worldly life, vairagya, and he no longer strives to possess worldly objects for his sense enjoyment. He begins to feel himself as different from the body and the mind, from the deha and the manas. So when the mind becomes dispassionate, all knowledge about bondage and liberation arises in him. And only then does he attain moksha or liberation. The Bhagavad Gita teaches dharma or righteousness to entire mankind. Krishna is the greatest teacher who makes everyone perform one's own dharma. Lord Krishna imparts the philosophy of self restraint for the brahmacharis, karma yoga and karma sannyasa for the grihasthas or householders, dhyana yoga for the vanaprasthas, and finally sankhya yoga for the sannyasis. However, this prescription of dharma is only for bringing about the purity and chitta shuddhi of the mind. The ultimate doctrine of the Bhagavad Gita is not to give any duty to anybody, but to enlighten the soul with self knowledge, which then grants freedom from all duties. The teachings of the Bhagavad Gita are very methodical and scientific. This makes the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita universal and beyond the limited boundaries of caste, religion, creed, or nationality. The purpose of the Bhagavad Gita is to make us know and realize that this is what is bondage, that this is what is liberation or moksha, that this is what is the path leading to Brahman. So in the first chapter, Vedavyasa Maharshi describes the ethical dilemma faced by those who follow the path of Vedic Dharma. For those who follow anti-Vedic materialism, that is Arthavada or Arthashastra, all their activities are prompted by insatiable lust and greed. They play politics to achieve their selfish goals and do not follow any ethical code of conduct. They preach atheism and do not believe in the life hereafter. They in fact do not even discharge their responsibilities towards their family and society. However, those who follow the path of ethics and morality, that is Dharma Shastra, are often confronted with a sense of sin and virtue, papa and punya. They always keep the life hereafter, that is the life in Swarga or the higher worlds, in view in all their undertakings. They have compassion for their fellow beings and they share their happiness with them. They keep social welfare above their personal goals. This type of moral and ethical life is a prerequisite for pursuing the study of the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita begins with the words Dharmakshetre Kurukshetre. This physical body is also called as Dharmakshetra, since all righteous actions are performed with the help of the body. Every individual has to constantly fight battles with hostile forces while performing one's own duty in various walks of life. And the origin of every battle is ahankara and mamakara. Ahankara, ego; mamakara, attachment. Ahankara, the feeling of I; mamakara, the feeling of mine with respect to sense objects. So in the first chapter, we'll not go into the various verses. Sri Shankaracharya also begins his commentary from the second chapter after many verses. However, a little background has to be given. After, as you all know, the story, uh, Arjuna asks Krishna to take his chariot in between the two armies so that he can see against whom he is going to fight. And when he sees his gurus, Dronacharya, Bhishma, Kripacharya, all his relatives and honorable elders, he begins to uh, start talking in a different way. Arjuna was a great warrior who had fought a great many wars for protecting Dharma, and he never expressed sorrow in killing others on the other occasions. But however, now he is overcome by grief because the enemies happen to be his own cherished relatives like Bhishma and Drona. And because of the identification with his body, he has now forgotten his own dharma of fighting a just war and starts talking philosophy. The first chapter is also known as Vishada Yoga, uh, the yoga of sorrow. The main cause of sorrow of Arjuna was his attachment towards those who were related to his body. He was feeling dejected that he had to fight this battle against his own near and dear ones like Dronacharya and Bhishmacharya. And Sri Krishna had to remove this delusion of Arjuna that he was his body. And hence he commences the second chapter called Sankhya Yoga to remove this delusion of Arjuna. So this Sankhya Yoga, the Sankhya Tattva Jnana, is that which reveals the integral knowledge of the Supreme Self. The Sankhya Yoga of the Bhagavad Gita is different from the Sankhya philosophy, Sankhya Darshana, expounded by the Rishi Kapila. Of course, there are some similarities between the two systems. The doctrine of the Sankhya Yoga says that liberation is possible only through the direct knowledge of the eternal truth of the self and by no other means. This is very important. Moksha is possible only through jnana or knowledge, is the doctrine of the Sankhya Yoga. Now again, we'll not go into the various verses, but the gist of the matter is that Arjuna becomes dejected and says that he wants to give up the war and become a sannyasi. Now Arjuna realizes that this is a delusional talk of Arjuna, as Arjuna is not free from the activities of the body, mind and speech and is impelled by desires and the fruits of these activities. And hence the life of a sannyasi is not his dharma. The dharma of Arjuna, being a kshatriya, was to preserve, to fight and preserve dharma, to protect women, weak people, and those who are non-kshatriyas, brahmanas, rishis, to protect dharma, being a kshatriya. And he wanted to run away from his duties, having been overcome by mamakara and the sense of I, ahankara and mamakara. Arjuna pleads to Krishna that he is overcome by karpanya dosha. Karpanya dosha is that pathetic mental state which is marked by thirst for sense objects, and one who craves for rewards of actions. It's a deprived mental state wherein a person constantly craves for one thing or another and undertakes all actions keeping enjoyment of results of actions in view. However, it is important to note here that this Karpanya dosha of Arjuna was not not the result of the thirst for sense objects and various enjoyments. This mental state of Arjuna was due to lack of clarity, due to undue passion for the body and its attachments to the relations of this body, to Dronacharya, Bhishma, to lack of clarity of his dharma or duty. Yajnavalkya says in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad that whoever departs from this world without knowing this imperishable one is a Skripana. So this Karpanya dosha is a very important obstacle for all sadhakas. Now Arjuna's question was, should he fight this battle as a true Kshatriya and kill those who were very dear to him, or should he retire from the battle and become a sannyasi? Arjuna, please note, was not frightened of the war. He was the most courageous warrior of his times. He was not even afraid of the result of battle, or he was not afraid of defeat. So this mamakara was the cause for his lack of clarity. So after all these questions of Arjuna, Lord Krishna now commences the second chapter by imparting Sankhya Gnana to Arjuna to drive away his sorrow which has arisen out of the delusion that he is the body. Now there are two paths laid down in the Vedic Dharma which leads to moksha. One is the path marked by the performance of duty without any attachment to its results. We can call it yoga or karma yoga. And the other path is characterized by renunciation of all duties, and it is called as Sankhya. In yoga or karma yoga, it is founded on the belief that the self is the agent, the self is the doer of actions. Sankhya is based on the conviction that the self is a non-agent or a non-doer. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna seeks to reconcile these two apparently conflicting doctrines of the Vedas. So all karmas are meant for self-purification. This point is to be remembered. Karmas, actions, or we can take it either in the sense of karmakanda, that is rituals, or in the modern world we can take karmas as actions. They are meant for self-purification. Chittasya shuddhaye karmaha. Through self-purification, one becomes qualified for abidance in the knowledge of the self. Chitta shuddhi gnana siddhi. Through the knowledge of the self alone, liberation or moksha is attained. Gnana devatu kaivalyam. So the Bhagavad Gita is a very important milestone in the evolution of Vedic spirituality, where an integration of the various ways of Vedic scriptures was done. A re-evaluation and integration was done by Sri Krishna. The Bhagavad Gita does not make an attempt to bring a synthesis of Vedic activities, that is the karma kanda or rituals, and the Sankhya for attainment of liberation. These two paths cannot be applied to the same person at the same time. Please note. They are to be practiced by different people who are differently qualified. So, the way of action, the way of yoga, the way of karma yoga, the way of karma kanda is for chitta shuddhi. And the way of sankhya, the way of knowledge, is for attainment of the knowledge of the self. So, the path of chitta shuddhi and the renunciation of action cannot be simultaneously undertaken by the same person. Either it is meant for different people who are in different levels, or it is to be practiced successively by the same person. This is a very important point for sadhakas. So there are two paths in Vedic Dharma, the path of pravritti and the path of nivritti. So in the ancient days, Bhagavan imparted this law of the Vedas to the 7 sages of the Saptarishis and to the 4 Manasaputras or of Brahma, or the 4 Kumaras. The Pravritti Marga was given to the Saptarishis: Bhrigu, Angirasa, Atri, Gautama, Kashyapa, Vasishtha and Agastya. And the Nivritti Marga was imparted to the 4 Kumaras: Sanaka, Sanandana, Sanatana and Sanat Kumara. The Pravritti Marga is the path of prosperity through righteous actions, through dharma. Whereas the Nivritti Marga, or the path of moksha through knowledge, is through renunciation of all actions. These are the twofold paths of Vedic Dharma, which Bhagavan himself gave. However, in course of time, this knowledge declined, and therefore the Lord, the Bhagavan, had to revive this Dharma through the message of the Bhagavad Gita for the welfare of entire mankind. The ultimate aim of the Bhagavad Gita is to bring complete cessation of transmigratory life, samsara, through absorption in the self. The various talks about varna, ashrama, the performance of dharma or duty are all only incidental for the attainment of the knowledge of the self. For the very last verse, Sri Krishna himself says, giving up all dharma, seek refuge in the self alone. So this is the central theme of the holy science of the Bhagavad Gita. However, one cannot establish oneself in the Atman without giving up body identification. The entire Adhyatma or spirituality is just this understanding of the fact that we have to give up the false identification with the body, mind and ego complex. Deha, Manas, Ahankara. Our entire modern life is meant for deriving all kinds of sensual pleasures, and hence, unfortunately, is opposed to spirituality. And this is the greatest challenge that we modern sadhakas face. This is what is called as Kali Yuga. The body identification is at its highest compared to the other 3 yugas, and hence the greater the challenges in sadhana. The Shruti says that the one who is established in the Atman goes beyond all sorrows. So this should be the keyword for all sadhakas of the Bhagavad Gita. We are not scholars who are interested in the various interpretations of the shlokas, of the various translations, of the various meanings of the words. we do Manana on the Bhagavad Gita to extract the essence of what Krishna is telling, of what Krishna wants us to do in our sadhana. This much is enough. So now in Sankhya Yoga, the fundamental basis of dukkha or sorrow is the false identification of the self with the non-self, of the Atman, the false identification of the Atman with the Anatman. This Atman is free from the sixfold modifications of birth, existence, growth, change, decay, and destruction. Now, in the 13th verse of the second chapter, Sri Krishna says, Dehino yasmin yata dehe kaumaram yavanam jara tata dehantara praptir dhiras tatra na mohyati. Just as boyhood, youth, old age are attributed to the embodied soul due to this body, similar is the attainment of another body. The wise ones do not get deluded in this matter. So this soul remains unchanged when the body passes through these three stages of Yavana, young age, middle age, and old age. The soul does not grow when childhood passes into adolescence. The soul does not decline when old age advances. The soul remains unchanged and immutable. And similar is the case when the soul acquires another body. There is no change to the immutable nature of the soul. So the wise one bears all pleasure and pain arising due to the departure of sense objects, kith and kin, with fortitude. Krishna says in the 15th verse, Samadukka sukham dhiram so amrutatvaya kalpate. The wise man to whom pain and pleasure are alike and who is not tormented by these contacts becomes eligible for immortality. And in the 16th verse, Shri Krishna says, the unreal, the asat, has no existence, and the real, the sat, never ceases to be. The reality of both has thus been perceived by the seers of truth. So, by explaining the concept of the Atman or the Self to Arjuna, Shri Krishna is not intending to make Arjuna fight. The Lord wants to remove the delusion of Arjuna by revealing the eternal nature of the soul. He only wants to remove the obstacles in the path of Arjuna to the performance of his duty, which Arjuna himself had voluntarily selected. In the 20th verse, Shri Krishna says, this soul is neither born nor does it die at any time. Nor is it that this soul, having come to exist, will cease to be. This Atman is birthless, ajaha, eternal, nitya, everlasting, shashvata, ancient, puranaha. It is not slain when the body is slain. A similar verse is there in the Kathopanishad also. It describes the indestructible nature of the Atman. Lord Krishna says boldly that death is just a change of dress for the soul, wherein it discards the old body and takes up a new body. So the knowledge of this eternal and imperishable nature of the Atman should give rise to supreme self-confidence, fearlessness, abhaya, courage and strength. So from verse 12 to verse 30, Shri Krishna describes the pristine glory of the Atman, which eliminates samsara and gives moksha. However, from the verse number 31 to 36, Sri Krishna starts describing duty of individuals. Now, this duty consciousness arises because of the identification with the body. So, people who are unable to understand the nature of the Atman should perform their ordained duty according to their swabhava, according to their natures. And this duty, this swadharma, is to be performed without any attachment to the results. And this leads to uh, attainment of swarga and chitta shuddhi. So we will go into this aspect in the next part of this video. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.